following video is not of my production. I found this video on a camera that I bought online. It is a celebration of the Cherokee Nation. I hope you enjoy it.
And laid a foundation of financial accountability and a vision, competitive intelligence concept of God-do-Gi. It means to come together and work for the benefit of the community. It's sort of interesting that we're appreciative that you're supportive of bigger language, because the competitive intelligence of the Cherokee language, three-syllable word, God-do-Gi, takes 6 or 8 words in English to say. Isn't that interesting? So the idea of a community and work for the benefit of the community is a foreign concept in English. And that demonstrates the competitive and high intelligence and humanistic terms of the Cherokee language. And the mystery for us and all of Oklahoma is find this competitive intelligence embedded in all the 39 tribal languages that are here. Sometimes we believe we've come a long way, from 3 employees to 6,000, from $10,000 budget to several hundred million. But sometimes things don't change a lot. One is noted for self-help projects, and that's where we're at. Roots of God-do-Gi. And I've been told that Wilma dug water line ditches. Well, just last week, Charlie and I were in a water line ditch, and it's a great spirit one has brought us with, and that Ross laid the foundation, is a spirit of community. I know Wilma from several decades past. She was actually my wife, Bobby Gale's neighbor at Many-Colored Flats there in the thriving metropolis of Rocky Mountain. It's a great day for us all, and I thought many times how I would, not necessarily for this event, but many times thought how would I best characterize a woman and color, what kind of image I could share with you. It was back at the Cherokee Church there in Rocky Mountain, and each year they have a memorial service on Memorial Weekend. People come out of the church and they sing this traditional Cherokee song and march into the cemetery to lay flowers and give remembrance to those who passed on. And on that one day, I saw her sitting at the stairs of the church, and she was wearing a white dress. And there the kids were playing around the grounds, and the grandkids were sort of climbing on all over her, like grandkids do with grandparents. And things were in perspective. She was at the heart of the Cherokee Nation, in the heart of the Cherokee people. And just several days before, she received from President Clinton the Presidential Medal of Freedom. To me, that personified the richness and the contribution of our chief, Wilma Mankeller.
I really appreciate it. I did not write a speech, and what I thought I would do is just do something I rarely do, and which is speak more personally today. I want to make some comments because we're in a library, which I love, about books and books that have made a difference in my life. And then because there's a leadership class here, I want to make just a couple of comments about 2 or 3 of the attributes of leadership that I think are very, very important. Time for questions and answers. I might mention to the organizers I have a very severe hearing problem, so during the question and answer period, somebody will have to come back up and questions. Sure.
Halito, that's a Choctaw word. Are there any other Choctaws here?
Hi.
You're a long way from home. I wish Will Hill would loan me some of his lovely words. The great Oklahoma historian Angie Debo wrote in her book on Tulsi Town of an impassioned speech given by Chito Crazy Snake Harjo. The occasion was that he was imploring the United States not to divide up the Indian lands and break their treaties and form allotment. But the speech was in vain. And Ms. Debo says, this was the last flare of the Indian spirit in the white man's town of Tulsa. But the Circle of Honor is to prove that it was mistaken. It was conceived to honor an Oklahoman Indian for achievements and enriching our lives and contributions. Our first recipient was Charles Chibiddy in 2004. He was a Comanche code talker. But we believe the Chief Man-Killer embodies our standard more than here and share this space with her, and to present this lovely bronze medallion with the symbol of the Circle of Honor and a $5,000 check from our sponsors to her. And most of all, I'm happy to say that she indeed there is a flare of Indian spirit left, and that Tulsa is not just a white man's city. And David Nofire has another bestowment.
Who I've known since he was a baby.
On behalf of the American Indian Resource Center, we would like to present you with this blanket. So I'm honored to wrap this around.
Okay, thank you, David. Well, it's wonderful to see so many friends here. I saw Ross Swimmer during the Christmas season, and I asked him about Margot Nofire, and I see her here, and she's doing well. I'm very happy to see her here. Before I make some remarks, I wanted to recognize my granddaughter, Brianna, who's here with us today, and she's a member of the Cherokee Choir. Alicia Wing, who's somewhere here, and probably in the back. She's always sitting in the back somewhere. And I wanted to recognize three men that have made a huge difference in my life, beginning with Charlie Soap, who was a tireless campaigner for me. It's interesting, most people's perception of Charlie is that he's kind of a laid-back country guy, but he's a so he in every election, I was in three elections, three successful elections, and Charlie was a central figure in all those elections, a tireless campaigner. And he's fluent in Cherokee and helped a lot with older people. And but he's also been a great life partner in every other way. When I first became ill and I needed a kidney transplant, and we've gone through every possible relative, Charlie made the final call, the last call to my brother Don, who ended up donating a kidney to me. So I owe a lot to Charlie Soap, my husband. He's a wonderful person. And I also wanted to thank Ross Swimmer, who was my boss when I came to work for the Cherokee Nation. And Ross Swimmer's the fellow who brought me to the dance. And what Ross Swimmer and I had in common, though we sometimes had ideas on politics, and that what Ross Swimmer and I had in common is that we believed in Cherokee people, and we believed in running a professional tribal government. And I loved working for him. He's a very smart man, very organized man, who did a lot for the Cherokee Nation, and he invited me to run in 1983 despite incredible opposition. And I think most of the members of his campaign slate opposed my election, and he stayed. And I really, really appreciate that fact. So I wanted to recognize Ross Swimmer here. wanted to recognize Michael Wallace, who wrote the very first major national article about the Cherokee Nation. He came out to my house and wrote the article, and then he and I later co-authored a book together, but he sort of put Cherokee issues out in the public. And what Michael understood from the outset is that if there was going to be media attention focused on me, we needed to focus it on the history and on the government. And he every single time he wrote something, so to recognize Michael Wallace. Books for me have always played a huge role in my life. Most people, Native people, talk about the negative impact of boarding schools and the problems in boarding schools, but I want to talk a little bit about one positive aspect of boarding schools. My father and my Aunt Sally each attended Sequoia boarding school their entire lives, from the time they were 5 and 6 years old until they were young adults. So Sequoia was home. What my father learned from Sequoia boarding school was a love of reading, and when in rural Adair County, next to Bobby Smith's family, we had very little contact with the world outside our community. With no paved roads, community, we had no electricity, no indoor plumbing, very little access to the outside world. And but we had books. We had a lot of books, and played board games. We played board games and cards virtually most of our lives. Chinese checkers, dominoes, checkers, poker, whatever. And the love of reading that my father acquired at Sequoia affected our entire family. My mother's very well read. Most of my sisters are very well read. When I was growing up, one of the books that I remember reading a lot, I remember reading a lot of the series. You'd have to be my age to remember Nancy Drew, but she was a very heroic figure, and I read every book I could get my hands on about this very strong young woman, and that had an enormous impact on me. I also read some of the great classics that I found just laying around our house, and other books like that. As an adult, some of the books that had an impact on me, and I'll talk about the one that had the most impact on me in a minute. As I was trying to just understand the world around me and learn about different people and different cultures, I read all kinds of different, and I think, as an aside, I want to say that I think one of the things that really helped me in life is that my parents taught me, both my parents are Republicans, most of their are Democrats, and we always talked about politics in our family, books and politics in our family. And we were very poor, very economic assets, but we were very rich in conversation and literature and politics. What I learned from just living this life with my parents is honor and respect people who had very different views than I did. We could all look at the evening news and get into an argument about what was on the news, because we and came away with a different perspective. But that same sort of ability to embrace people who have different views allowed me to things I don't think I would have explored if I'd been raised in a different environment. And so I read about an autobiography of George O'Keeffe, which had the great artist. I didn't know women like that. Here's a woman who painted what she wanted. She lived where she wanted to live. When she was in her 80s, off to the desert with a man in his 30s, and I thought, that's my kind of woman. And anyway, so that was interesting to see. Read a book, a very strong, independent woman who did what she wanted to do. I remember reading a book called Death in Venice, about repressive societies and what they do to people, that had a huge impact on me. I read Vine Deloria's Custer Died for Your Sins, read and loved those books, and they made an impact on me. The book that was probably the most life-changing for me, and I think helped me enable my work at the Cherokee Nation, was an obscure book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. And I actually traveled to Cornell University to hear him speak at the Cherokee Nation because I was so impressed with him. He was a Catholic priest who worked among poor people in Brazil. And what I learned from that book is that it's important for low-income people and people who find themselves in very difficult political situations to trust their own thinking, to believe in themselves, and to develop solutions within their own communities to solve their own problems. What Paulo Freire did in his community is he actually put up a little map on the wall, showed the people in the communities their history and the history of how they got to the situation they found themselves in. So the little light bulb went on, and they could start and say, it's not my fault, and it's not the fault of my family or my community that we're in the situation we find ourselves in today, landless, poor, and illiterate. But it is our responsibility to get ourselves out of this situation. But it was, for me, it was life-changing. It was a very simple principle, but it made a huge difference in my life. And I remember having some meetings with people within the Cherokee Nation. I remember one in particular in the BRICS community when I did that method and did a little map and illustrated on this map, on a flip chart, all the things that had happened to Cherokee people so that to explain with some of the problems we have today, put our current problems in a historical context. And people cried. People cried at that meeting. They were so profoundly moved because they were thinking it was somehow their fault or the fault of their neighbors. So that book had an enormous impact on me. A book that I absolutely love is a book called Walking the Bible. I really like that book because it's a sort of a chronicle of a one man's journey through all the important places that are mentioned in the Bible, and then he describes the place. What I like about it, he describes the geography of the area, but he also talks about what's going on in these places right now. I love that book. And then Weathersford's book on Genghis Khan. I don't know if any of you have read that, but I highly recommend it. It's a superb book. And China last year, and I read that book before going to China, and it helped me enormously to understand China. Books have always taken me to places I may not otherwise have been able to go. We had a rough life. When we lived here before we went to California. We lived in a very tough house in San Francisco. And so in order to sometimes leave that life and that world, I simply would pick up a book. Instantly go.
Hey, Is the Cherokee Choir singing now? This is later.
We hope that the sacred gifts of language will never be lost. Please join me in welcoming the choir.
Iga dochula sata jo sai Soloist on our first song was Miss Christina Hanby from Westville, and then our second soloist was Brianna Olaya, who is Wilma's granddaughter. And that was a very special gift. I really had to twist her arm. Wonderful job.
Newly
end our portion of the program today with songs called Orphan Child. And our Chief Smith, who is our #1 fan, I have to tell you. A lot of times is our national song of comfort. And even though you may not understand the words, you will understand the meaning behind this last song, The Orphan Child. Thank you for being so attentive. And if you want to take some of our music home, we do have a table set up right over here. And Kathy would be glad to take your music. Thank you.